Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This week, a special edition of Insight. We are just a few days away from the primary. This past week, we were out at the Neshoba County Fair. All the candidates for statewide races were there as well. And 12 News' Gerald Harris has a story of the speeches.
Well, that wraps up the political speeches here at the Neshoba County Fair, where there was a lot of barbs thrown and angling for Tuesday's primary election. From the attacks in the race for the GOP nomination for governor.
For somebody that has been in the legislature running the Senate for 8 years, they killed the pro-life heartbeat bill for 7 years by sending it to one of the most liberal committee chairmen of committees every single year.
Roads and bridges. Now, there'll be some people up here to tell you that the special session solved the roads and bridges. The facts say otherwise.
I'm not running for governor against bad candidates. I'm running for governor against bad ideas.
Every candidate tried to paint themselves as the best person for the job.
Our message to those that were here today is that we're going to fix our roads. We're going to help on education.
Down ballot candidates even squared off like those in the Attorney General's race.
I am running to be the Attorney General for all Mississippians.
You don't have to speculate as to what I'm telling you I'm going to do. You can actually see what I have done.
The question is, who is the person best prepared to be the state's chief law enforcement official and the state's top lawyer? And I believe I'm that person.
The best qualified individual to serve as the Attorney General.
Every statewide office is up for election. And be sure to stick with WJTV Tuesday as we have full coverage of the primary election. Reporting in Neshoba County, Gerald Harris, WJTV 12.
And after the speeches, Gerald and I had the chance to talk with a pair of political watchers from Mississippi Today. We talked about what we heard and what it means. Welcome to Mississippi Insight. We're here at the Neshoba County Fair talking politics here. We're here with Adam Gadishaw and Bobby Harrison with Mississippi Today, and a lot happened for these 2 days of talks. And Bobby, let's talk to you about what happened, particularly with the governor's race. What did you see and what came out of that?
Well, this is the primary is Tuesday, and there's a thought now that there's likelihood to be a runoff between Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, who has been considered a front runner this whole time, but now it looks like former Chief Justice Bill Waller's got a lot of momentum. He gave what I thought was a good speech today, a fiery speech, best speech I think I've heard him give. And so I think he's got some momentum going into Tuesday. You know, Reeves was not bad, but just and the third candidate, Robert Foster, wasn't bad either. It's just that it appears Bill Waller has a lot of momentum going into Tuesday's primary election.
And there was a lot of energy in the room all day. But talk to us, the gloves were off a couple of times. Robert Foster didn't mince any words when he came to Lieutenant Governor Reeves. Talk to me about your assessment and how the attacks were there.
Robert Foster has the most ground to make up here. He's been consistently polling in third place. He had some momentum, I think, probably 3-4 weeks ago after our colleague Larison Campbell wrote her story about not being able to ride with his campaign without a male colleague present.
My truck, my rules.
My truck, my rules. That's right. I just think that he has the least to lose here. I mean, he has to make up the most ground with the least to lose. So you're right. He did take the gloves off. He knocked Tate Reeves on 2 or 3 different issues, and I think like his strategy going into his speech at the fair was very clearly, I'm going to differentiate myself among conservative voters from Tate Reeves, the front runner, and nothing to lose.
So what do you see happening here? Did anybody walk away with a bump from these speeches, do you think, in the governor's race?
Well, I mean, maybe Waller, like I was speaking of, I just thought he had momentum going into this fair, and I don't think he did anything to lose that momentum. It's funny, a lot of people wanted Waller to be more like Foster in terms of just kind of taking the gloves off and really going after Tate Reeves, but he's doing it in a different way. He is, he's going after Reeves on issues. His main message is that the economy is not doing as well as it should. The state as a whole is not doing as well as it should. And Tate Reeves is the lieutenant governor. He's kind of running for governor as the incumbent. He's been there for 8 years, helping set policy, and he's got the endorsement of outgoing Governor Phil Bryant. So yeah, I mean, it just seems right now it looks like it may be a Waller Reeves runoff, but we'll find out Tuesday.
And on the other side of that, the Democratic race, it was a slew of candidates today. Did any of the candidates on the Democratic side topple Attorney General Jim Hood, who's the front runner?
No, that's the short answer. I think, you have Felicia P. Williams and Robert Schuer Smith. Those are the two outside of Hood, they've raised the most money, and I say most money very relatively speaking here. I don't think either one of them have raised more than $15,000, $20,000, and it's kind of the Foster situation. They have a ton of ground to make up. They had nothing to lose by getting on the podium this morning and trying to knock on Hood. But I think two things. One, the crowd at the Neshoba County Fair is very heavily conservative to begin with, so I'm not sure, unless you're watching media coverage and these lesser known candidates got a lot of the coverage, which I tend to doubt is the case. I'm not sure they could possibly have gotten a bump. And the second thing is, Jim Hood has a lot of money. He has a lot of money. He's got very universal statewide name ID. He's been on statewide ballot 4 times previously. It's going to be tough for any of those candidates to really gain too much substantial ground on Hood.
Let's turn to the Attorney General's race here, and that got kind of fiery too, because you had Andy Taggart talking his platform about he has the experience to be the Attorney General. Mark Baker kind of fired at him pretty strongly. Where do you see that race going? And finally, Lynn Fitch got up there and spoke, and she really hasn't been speaking much as far as to the media is concerned. So where do you see that race going?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, Fitch has been running as the incumbent. She's been treasurer for 2 terms, so she has more name identification than Baker or Taggart. But Baker and Taggart's been running a real aggressive race, and I think that's a $64,000 question. Everybody assumes Lynn Fitch is going to lead on Tuesday, but will one of those candidates bump her under 50 and force a runoff? And if so, which one of those candidates? Both Baker and Taggart have been just like really going out there game busters, and Baker has been helped in recent weeks by third-party groups that's poured, like I've been told, more than $800,000 into his campaign for television ads. So he's been on television just a whole lot in the past few weeks. So that may be the biggest difference.
Yeah. Any surprises you expect to see on Tuesday when it comes to that race?
On that race, probably not. I'm with Bobby. I just don't know if there is going to be a runoff between Lynn Fitch and a second-place person. I don't know which one between Taggart and Baker there'll be. In their speeches, it was interesting to me. I thought all 3 candidates really tried to pitch themselves as the most conservative Republican in the race, which is interesting because we haven't, in the state's modern political history, we have not had a Republican Attorney General. So they're poised, it looks like, to, in all likelihood, in November, one of those Republicans is probably going to win that seat. And they're at the Neshoba County Fair trying to say, trying to pitch to voters which one is the most conservative.
Oh, and of course they're taking on Jennifer Riley Collins for that seat.
Right, and her speech I was impressed. That's second or third time I've seen her out on the trail. She's unopposed in the Democratic primary, so she really had no reason to make a lot of these stops early in the campaign cycle. But she focused her whole speech on her service in the U.S. Army, and sort of the theme of her speech was, I'm going to go to war, go to battle for you in all these different areas. I thought she delivered a great speech. It was meaningful, and she talked a lot about social justice, which could not have been more opposite from the 3 Republicans in the race that we heard from at the fair. So she's trying to. I think she's got a case to make. It's tough for a Democrat with little name ID like she has. She might have a little bit of name ID built up in the Jackson area, but other than that, she has a lot of work to do.
Yesterday, when Secretary of State Michael Watson and Commissioner Britton, they went after each other big time, and it got kind of personal.
Yeah, they probably have one of the nastiest campaigns going on right now.
Yeah. I've been covering that, as has Gerald. I know, man. They are just going at each other. It's nasty. They don't like each other. Their campaign teams don't like each other. To suggest, as we keep saying, the gloves are off, that the gloves have been off on that race for several weeks now, and you'll keep seeing until Election Day attack ads, and the Neshoba speeches, both of them used that podium in there to really just knock on the opponent. And I don't know, it's one of those. I think it happens, Bobby, every statewide election cycle. There's at least one of those.
Yeah, right.
That's definitely the one this year.
What do you see as far as voter turnout? Do you think voters are motivated to go to the polls on Tuesday, or do you think they're going to stay home?
Yes, I think there's going to be a big turnout, and this is something to watch. Maybe Adam's talked to y'all before about this, but this will be probably the first time in a state election in modern times where there's more people voting in the Republican primary than the Democratic primary. I think that's probably going to happen this time, and because the governor's race is so hotly contested, and a lot of the local counties have changed from Democratic to Republican control. So I think the sheriffs and the supervisors will be running as Republicans. So I think there'll be a larger Republican turnout than Democratic turnout.
And Byron spoke about surprises earlier, but is there going to be any surprises anywhere Tuesday?
I don't know. One of the things that I've mentioned is in that Democratic primary for governor. My bold prediction there has been, I think Felicia P. Williams is going to carry more votes than Robert Schuler Smith, which might come as a surprise to people in the Jackson Metro. I've seen her. She's spent more money than he has, and she's also been working the trail harder. I don't know if you can count that as a major surprise, though, because I don't think it's going to make any difference in the outcome of that election. I still think Jim Hood easily wins on the first ballot.
And on the when we talk about surprises, I mean, if you go back a month or at least 2 months to think about where Tate Reeves was and how much of a front runner he was considered in this race and how much more money he had than the other Republican candidates, if he doesn't win outright Tuesday and he is forced into a runoff, that would be kind of a surprise in itself when you think about where he was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I mean, what, 10-to-1 fundraising advantage to his next opponent, and you heard a lot from Tate Reeves' corner for several months. Once the field was set back in March, Bill Waller Jr. is a nice guy and he's got some name ID, but he's not a real threat. In the past 3-4 weeks or so, you've heard Tate Reeves and some of his allies and surrogates start saying, a runoff would be, fine. 50% would be great, but we're ready for a runoff. So there's been definitely a shift in narrative there, to Bobby's point about that being, sort of a surprise here, and we'll see how that shakes out.
I heard one attack from Lieutenant Governor Reeves to the other candidates. He said he wasn't running against bad candidates, he was running against bad ideas. So that's something to point out.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, a lot going on, and we'll see what happens come Tuesday. All right. And we'll be right back with more Mississippi Insight after this. This week's fair is notable because it was the last one for Governor Phil Bryant. After 2 terms, he's not running again. Gerald and I caught up with the governor after his farewell speech. We are here with Governor Phil Bryant, and Governor, this is your last Neshoba County Fair. How did it feel to give that final speech as governor?
Relief. It really did. I mean, every year we want to work really hard because I know this is like a state of the state in the Neshoba County Fair, but bittersweet. Deborah and I have been working for the last 8 years trying to do the very best we can as governor and lieutenant governor, and this is sort of a swan song for us. But luckily we got a lot of good things to talk about. So a lot of people are working in the state of Mississippi. Our graduation rate is up higher at national level. Money is in the bank. We filled the rainy day fund. We got $310 million more money coming into the budget. So good time to be talking here at Neshoba County Fair as governor.
Yeah. And Governor, you did list off those accomplishments. Kind of go back, and for those who didn't hear and those who weren't at the fair, what you told the audience out there?
Well, what I was trying to tell them is the successes that have occurred. If you look again at the graduation rate, if I had been running 8 years ago and I said I'm going to take graduations in Mississippi from 70% to 85%, they wouldn't have believed it. If I told them I'm going to fill your rainy day fund $500 million and you're going to have $310 million more to spend, they wouldn't have believed it. If I would have said we're going to get our third graders to 95% reading and then we're going to double the test, make it tougher, and 85% of them are going to be able to pass that, they would have said that will never happen. If you look at, we said we got 24.7 million people came to the state of Mississippi, more visitors than any time in Mississippi's history. So all of those records that have been set, 1.1 billion more dollars going into infrastructure. So we're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish.
So what's next for Governor Bryant?
Well, I've got to get moved. They're going to back that truck up one day, and I've got to go. So Deborah and I are getting our home finished, and we're going to spend a lot more time together. I've been away from the family, and Deborah and I have not been able to spend as much time, maybe do a little traveling vacation. So we're going to relax a little bit and see where life leads us.
All right, so politics over for the governor? Or
yes, it is. That's one thing I can tell you, won't ever run again.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank
Governor
you.
Phil Bryant, thank you very much. And when we come back, a special guest, freshman Congressman Michael Guest, gives us his insight on the upcoming elections. I had the pleasure of sitting down with 3rd District Congressman Michael Guest. The Republican and former Rankin-Madison DA is in his first year in the House. He's not running this year, and he shared his insight on the upcoming elections here in Mississippi. Talk about the state elections here. What do you see going on as far as like in the governor's race here, particularly in the Republican primary? We had a debate the other day. Where do you see that shaping up? And I know you've kind of been traveling a lot and back and forth, but how do you see that race shaping up?
You know, I see a lot of excitement in these statewide primaries that will be coming up in just over a week. And I think we've got good candidates. I think we've got good candidates in all of the statewide races up and down the ticket. I'm excited about the fact that, you know, we will soon learn who our Republican nominees are going to be because I think it's important that we work hard to continue to control the governor's mansion. I think it's important that we have those other statewide offices, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, State Treasurer, all those statewide offices are important. I'm excited about the number of good candidates. It looked like very early on that we would not have much of a primary in the governor's race, but we've had a couple of good candidates who have gotten in that race. I'm excited to see some of the things that they are doing, and I think it's healthy. I think when you have a debate among candidates, and of course y'all hosted the debate just a few days ago, I think it's important for candidates to be challenged on where they stand on issues, and to make sure that where they stand on those issues are where the people of Mississippi want them to be. And so things like y'all were doing and highlighting, and I don't think there were major differences, but the differences between those candidates are important. I think it's important that the voters really pay attention and that they research candidates and that they make informed decisions. What you don't want is someone showing up at the polls and really not knowing the differences on where these candidates stand. So I think what y'all are doing, what some of the other media outlets are doing on educating the voters on where each of these candidates stand on important issues is something that is going to make for a better educated, more informed electorate. But I am excited to see how the votes turn out. Depending on who you talk to, you hear all sorts of different people that are predicting how these races will turn out, but particularly we'll be paying close attention to both the governor's race and the attorney general's race. In those races, you have 3 very strong candidates who are running. Will be interesting to see in those 2 races, will those races be forced to go to a runoff? As you know, if no candidate gets more than 50%, the highest 2 vote-getting candidates will then be in a runoff 3 weeks later. So we may not know on Tuesday, August the 6th, who our nominee is going to be for governor or attorney general. We may have a 3-week additional period there for those candidates to continue to get out and continue to try to sell their message to the people of Mississippi.
We talked a lot more with Congressman Guest about his first 7 months in office and what he's hoping to accomplish during the remainder of his first term. We'll have the full interview a week from tonight. When we come back, Walt Grayson on the sights and sounds and smells from the Neshoba County Fair. To the Neshoba County Fair than just politics. Our Walt Grayson spent the week getting the flavor of the fair and talked with several people about what the fair means to them.
The Neshoba County Fair is an icon in Mississippi, kind of like the Biloxi Lighthouse and the Windsor Ruins. The cabins here primarily belong to descendants of the originators of the fair. But as some passed out of families over the decades and the cabin area expanded, other people have snatched the cabins up so they too can have the Neshoba County Fair experience.
Everything's fun about it. I mean, it's just people that haven't lived it really don't understand it. It's the only time of the year we get to have some really good quality time with our family, and not just our biological family, but our fair neighbors have become family, you know, and I got married almost 20 years ago. My fair neighbors were invited to my wedding. Just lifelong friendships that can't be replaced. The special bonds in the Neshoba County Fair really impact you for your entire life.
We can come out here and just enjoy everything and not have to worry about work and all that sort of thing. We can put our phones up and we don't have any TV to watch. We don't see bad news. We just, everything's just good.
But then, after no time at all, it seems, just a few days, the fair is over and it's time to go back home. There are a lot of mixed emotions.
I get a little depressed. I do. I hate to see it go every year. It's kind of I hate to see it go, but I'm worn out. So, I mean, it's kind of it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
It's a combination. It's sad in a way, and you're dead tired.
A lot of us actually cry a good bit. You're exhausted from the week. I mean, obviously the heat and the eating and the drinking and the constant going. So you're looking forward for the end of it physically, but the emotional part is pretty tough.
I guess packing up and going home would be even tougher if it weren't for a gift the solar system gives us. As the Earth goes around the sun, it always ends up back in the same place this time next year.
At the end of every year, I always look forward to next year. You know, make sure and look the dates up.
So next week, the cabins will empty out and people will begin to think about their phones and work and the news on TV again. But during the year when life gets to be too much some days, in the back of their minds is the thought, it won't be all that long till it's fair time again.
All right, thank you, Walt, and we'll be right back. Thanks for joining us for Mississippi Insight. A reminder, primary day is Tuesday. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Make sure you get out and vote, and join us all day and night for full election coverage. We'll see you back here next Saturday night.